Hey everybody, my name is Tim Hepworth and I'm here with Fly Fishing Bover Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying to bring you another quick tie. Now this quick tie is sponsored by Western Canada Fly Fishing Guide School. As you can see at the bottom of the screen, that is the website to go check it out. If that's something that has interest for you, please go ahead and take a look. So what we're going to be tying on this episode is the Wine Booby. Great little pattern, lake fishing pattern, maybe in the river, kind of up to you. Mostly it's fish in the lake, but a great pattern to fish. I'm going to be tying out of Season 6, Episode 3. So if you're tying out of your Season 6 kit, go ahead, grab the number 3 kit. If you're tying out of our individual packs, you'll already have it marked as this fly, so go ahead and do that. And if you don't have our kits, that's just fine. Head on over to our website at www.flyfishingbover.com/TNLS6 and you'll be able to find the full recipe for the fly, and you can just dig into your own materials and get after it. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. Hit that little bell icon so that we know that so that you can be notified every time we put out a new video, and drop some comments because we always love to know that you're in. And on this episode, we're gonna do something a little bit different. So it's a fun word, it's booby. Boobies, it's funny. So anytime that I say booby or booby, you better be counting. At the end of this video, drop in the comments that you got it. You know how many times I said it. And then I want you to send us a message through Facebook or through Instagram and just say, hey, I watched the video. I know how many times you said that word. And you have an opportunity to win our new sun shirt, which are not released yet. So you'd be one of very few who have it. Okay, that's cool. Let's get on with the fly. So let's take a look at the vise and see what we're working with. This is our Wine Booby. So you kind of see that's where it gets the whole booby thing from, is these big black foam eyes. Kind of the gist of how this fly fishes is you normally fish it on a sink tip. The sink tip causes that fly to dip down into the lake water, and as you're stripping it and pause, it'll start to rise back in the water column. Gives it a very cool action, and yeah, great one to tie up and give it a try. This is just one color. It can be tied in so many different color variations, but this is one of my favorites, the wine color. Okay, so let's open up our kits. Go ahead, let's get that fly out. We're gonna get our hook in the vise, and this is a little bit smaller hook again. We're on about a size 10 here, size 10 streamer hook. Nothing massive, but doesn't need to be. Get that in there good and solid. Make sure it's not going anywhere. For thread today, I'm going to be tying, this should be black, but it's a dark brown. Kind of the same. It's not super critical, but I recommend a black UTC 140. So something a little bit bigger. The streamers, it's easier to really clamp down that material in it, and you don't want to cut that foam for the booby head. So you want to have a little bit thicker thread. So let's go ahead. Let's start this thread just behind the eye, work it back a little bit. Then I'll go in with my scissors and just get rid of that tag end. And we're going to start off by getting the booby eyes put in right away. So how we're going to kind of do that is we want this to be right up at the eye of the hook. So think of these as just being like dumbbell eyes. Okay, so if I had that compressed in the middle, it would look very similar to dumbbell eyes. So I want you to think of it as the same thing. So I'm going to find that midway point. I'm going to lay it sideways on my hook shank like this. I'm going to take my first wrap through, second wrap, and I just want to kind of check and make sure that they're kind of even. And you can tell there that I was a little uneven. Move it over just a smidge. Check it again. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So once I've got a few wraps on it, I'm not pulling super tight. All I'm going to do is shift the angle and move those booby eyes so they're over in this direction. And now we got to just treat it like we would dumbbell eyes. Like I said before, we're going to figure 8 around them. We're going to make sure that we kind of lock down that middle. These eyes tend to want to move on the hook shank as it is, but that's not the end of the world. Even if they do move, they're very secured, so you can just kind of twist them back into place. So I'm going to start off by putting some cross wraps to kind of hold that angle back from tying it in the way we did. And I'm just going to do some figure 8s, go all the way around. I'm kind of keeping a finger on that foam because it does want to spin. You could put a little touch of glue on the underside to help them stay right there if you're that concerned about it. And then we also want to remember that once we kind of feel like it's secured, we want to go around just the booby eyes themselves. So that just means keeping my thread up on top of the hook, and that kind of pulls all those wraps together. And then I'll finish it off with a good cross wrap, and that should lock it in place. So in the underside, we're going to have it looking something like that. So if you want to put a little resin on there, feel free to do that. Now I'm going to work my way back down the fly. I'm going to be taking this all the way back to the top of the hook bend, not going into the hook bend, just kind of keeping it up on top of it. And then I'm gonna go to my next material, which is gonna be this wine colored marabou. Okay, now we really don't need a whole feather for this because it gets pretty bulky. So I'm just gonna kind of pull at the tips and pull some of that really nice plumage that's at the bottom out of the way, because this isn't a huge fly. And we can use all that plumage in the next portion when we need to come back to this. So I'm just gonna kind of pull out the tips. I'm gonna line them up, and like we did last week when we tied our last streamer, the thin mint, we tore out those tips, and I want you to do the same thing for this stage in the fly. So all I'm gonna do is place those tips across my scissors and just pull them. This is gonna make it a lot more full looking when my tips are broke off, so it looks like it's back thin. I pull it down and it just really plumes it up, okay? And if I find that it's a little uneven, I'll go back in and I'll do it again. So that was a little uneven. We don't want it to be perfectly straight across, but we want it to be reasonably even, okay? So I'm happy with that. I'm gonna come add a little moisture on my fingers, slick that marabou back so I can get a good gauge of the length. And then I want this to be roughly the hook shank, the full hook shank in length out the back of the fly. So I'm gonna kind of measure that right between those booby eyes. I'm gonna transfer that back, and then I'm gonna set it on top of the hook shank, and I'm gonna get a gathering wrap, get that locked in, do a few of them, kind of make sure I don't lock any of those extra fibers down, like that one's being stubborn. Once I got that like that, I'm gonna lift this up. I'm gonna kind of pull all that back, and I wanna take some thread wraps up here. Make sure that's good and secure. It's moving around on me a little bit, so I'll put a few more down. Work that back to the top of the hook band again. We want that to be nice and stable and not going anywhere. Now I'm just gonna take a few thread wraps up this feather, because this is gonna create a little bit of an underbody and a little bit more bulk, and it's gonna help the rest of the material stay where we want them to. So once I get up to here, I can come in, I can trim it out, set that feather aside, we'll use it in a second. And I'm just gonna work that marabou in. Now the next thing we're gonna do kind of the same thing over twice. So in this one, I'm gonna start off by getting back to some flash we're gonna put in the back, and we'll do it again at the head of the fly. So you got a bunch of flash in your kit. This kind of nice purpley pink colored flash. You could probably just grab a piece and cut it in half. It's not, we don't need that full length to work with, so I'm just gonna do that real quick. And then kind of a quick trick to tying it in on the same side, or on both sides at once, is I'm just gonna come in here and I'm gonna fold that flash around my thread, kind of even up the tips. Do that again, even up the tips, pinch them together, and then I'm gonna lift that straight vertical, and I'm gonna pull down with my thread, and that's gonna set both pieces of flash right on top of the hook shank. Then I'll just take a couple of wraps back, that secures it on the top. Now I can go in with my fingers and I can take one to one side of the fly and one to the other side of the fly. So I like to kind of pinch it with my fingers like that. And if I can manage to twist this so I can show you, you can see I've splayed them out. And then all I'm gonna do is pull some thread wraps back while I'm holding it on either side. And that's gonna cause those to go to either side. So then when I flip it up, you can see I've got a piece going out both sides. I'm gonna take that right back to where I tied in the marabou. And then all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna lift this up. I'm gonna trim them off just beyond the back end of that marabou. Now we don't want a ton of marabou at the back because this tail isn't super important at being long, and we're actually gonna add in some more marabou at the top that kind of extends back towards it as well, and that's what's really gonna fill up the fly. Now that I got that material in, I'm gonna go over here. This is very much like this leech wrap that we can get. It's like a kind of like a semi-seal leech wrap, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna tie this in, and we're actually just gonna palmer it up the fly. This is gonna create the body of the fly. So I'm gonna pull back so I can extend that kind of inner rope that's on it, and I'm gonna tie that rope in right at the back, and then I can secure it. Got to work around that hook point so you don't cut your thread, because we've all been there and that's not a lot of fun. And then I'm gonna take my thread all the way forward. I'm gonna do a quick little half hitch, so just a saving knot right behind the booby eyes. And then from there, I'm just gotta get that thread off the eye. And then I'm just gonna set this aside onto my bobbin cradle. Set that over here, it's out of the way. And now all we're going to do is work at palmering this. I'm not going to use the rotary function on the vise for this because as I go, I want to try to pull this material. You can see I pull it out and try to extend it. I want to pull that material out as I wrap. So not super, super tight wraps. We can open up that angle of our wrap a little bit. Doesn't have to be touching, but pretty close. It's going to look messy at first because there's no real consistency to the flow of the material that's on this. It's kind of wants to just go. It's like a messy hair day situation. So we're just going to slowly work that forward. We're going to take this right up to the booby eyes. And once I get up here, I'm going to bring my thread back. And again, like whenever we secure materials, we're going to go behind the material, in front, behind, in front. Do it again. And once I'm happy that that's secured, I can go and trim out that little rope. Set that aside, get a lot of flies out of that. And now that I'm here, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take a brush. You could take even a bodkin, something with a point, or a little piece of Velcro and a stick, whatever you want. And I'm just gonna kind of rough that up a little bit, and then just kind of comb it back so it wants to go back down the fly. And this just looks bulky, and that's all its purpose is. It's there to create a little bit of size and profile for this fly. So once I got it here, I'm happy with it. It's gonna extend down into that marabou. Then I'm gonna go back to that feather I cut out before. So this is kind of the stuff I used already. I'm gonna trim that out, and then I'll be able to get kind of another point created by pulling all those fibers forward. Okay, so that's kind of what I'm left with. This time I'm not gonna try to tear up the tips because I want it to be a little bit more flowy up top here. And all I'm gonna do, put a little bit of moisture on that again. And I'm gonna measure again off the top of the hook eye or the hook point here. And I want those to extend roughly just beyond the back ones. Okay, so I'm gonna just switch hands. I'm gonna set that right between the booby eyes. And I'm gonna take a thread wrap to secure it. Take a couple more. Nice and tight, then I'm gonna lift up the butt ends. Make sure I get a thread wrap on that side as well. And then I can go ahead and trim out that marabou. Like so. And I'm just gonna do a couple more wraps just to make sure that material's not going anywhere. And that's what we should be left with at this point. We've got kind of our collar or our wing that's gonna extend a little bit beyond the other marabou. We've got that flash built into the back end, and now the last piece is we're just gonna put some more flash in. So I'm gonna do the same thing I did last time. You can kind of use the other half of the one that you already used. Except this time, I'm not gonna do that technique I showed you in the back because there's not a lot of space to work with it here, and I just wanna put each individual piece of flash in. So I'll start on my side of the fly. Again, I want it to extend roughly to the back end. And this time, if it's a little bit up on top of the side of the hook shank, that's kind of where I want it to be. I don't want this one to be perfectly sideways. I want it to kind of flow with that marabou we put in on top. So I'm gonna do a couple thread wraps there, and then I'm just gonna fold this guy over to the other side and do the same thing. So that it's gonna sit somewhere up in here. Get a couple thread wraps in. The one side is already trimmed to length, so I'll match it on this side. Just like that. And once that all gets wet, that's gonna sit back real nice. All that flash is gonna kind of match up. So then what I wanna do, guys, is I'm almost done. I'm just gonna come in here, I'm gonna whip finish this fly, give it a good 4 to 5 turn whip finish, or a couple of 2 to 3s. If you want to, you can definitely go ahead and put a little bit of resin right behind the booby eyes. But if not, that's totally fine. If you do a good knot like that, it shouldn't be coming apart on you at all. So that, my friends, is the Wine Booby. Great little flashy fly. Definitely give it a try in whatever your favorite trout lake is. Probably would work pretty good for some other species like bass, bluegill, that kind of thing too. But yeah, great little pattern. So this is the Wine Booby. Okay guys, thanks for tuning in for another quick tie. Again, my name is Tim Hepworth here with Fly Fishing Bover Outfitters and Thursday Night Live Fly Tying. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. Hit that bell icon so you know next week when we have our next 2 patterns coming out for the week. We'll be up into episode 4 next week. Okay guys, don't forget also, how many times did I say it? You're gonna wanna drop it in the comments, or not in the comments, you're gonna wanna say you did it and then you want to message us on Facebook or Instagram, let us know, and we'll go from there. So until next week, booby, booby, booby.